Sorry to be the bearer of bad news on this Friday afternoon, but summer is almost over. That also means the MPs are coming back. Ibiza for some will be a distant memory. And as politics returns to Westminster next week with a Conservative leadership race, Labour's first budget and party conference season just around the corner, if Keir Starmer was in his honeymoon period, that's about to be over. I'm Liz Bates, and on this episode of the Sky News Daily, I've got our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates to look ahead at what's coming up in British politics from next week. Of course, Sam will also be with you every weekday morning at 7:30. As Parliament returns, so does his podcast Politics at Jack and Sam's, where he and Politico UK editor Jack Blanchard explain what you need to know about the day's political news every morning so you're completely up to speed before you even get to work. So Sam, let's start with the Tories. They've been through a pretty tough time, but they are now into kind of leadership contest territory, which is always quite interesting and quite good fun for us to cover as political journalists. So who's standing, who's got a good chance, and where are they positioned in the party?
So out of the embers of the Conservative Party, there are now just 121 MPs, 92 men, 29 women left, which is hundreds fewer than Boris Johnson got elected in 2019. Out of that, they have to choose a new leader. And we're at the foothills of the next Conservative leadership contest. Now, at the moment, 6 people have thrown their hat in the ring. And without having written them down, let's try and get them all. There is James Cleverly. There is Tom Tugendhat. There is Priti Patel. There is Robert Jenrick. There is, can you believe it, Mel Stride. And there is one more. Who is, Liz?
Long silence.
The frontrunner, Kemi Badenoch.
Great, yes. And I knew that, but I wanted to leave the door open for you to say it.
Thank you very much indeed. And what's going to happen before and after Conservative Party conference at the end of September is that MPs are going to engage in rounds of voting to whittle down that 6 down to the final 2, which we should have fairly soon after Tory conference. And then those will go out to the low hundreds of thousands of Tory members that remain. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this contest, having observed it slightly from afar over the summer, is genuinely wide open. And the reason it's wide open isn't because of the sort of the members polling which is going on, which does put Kemi out in front. It's because the rounds of voting by MPs, there are so many of them to get it down from 6 to 2, that's going to be quite unpredictable.
What is the process?
So starting next week, so on Tuesday, there'll be some hustings. Then on Wednesday, there will be voting in a committee room. Tory MPs will trudge along and they will have to mark who they want. And at the end of that round of voting, one person will be taken by the hand by Davina to the exit door and thrust out for loser interviews. There's another round of that the week after, and then we get to conference and there'll be 4 of them. I think there is a bit of a division between those candidates that want to start kind of fighting right now, sort of every last bit of what Labour's doing, versus those that want to sort of spend a bit of time rebuilding credibility and having a bit of a stock take about what went catastrophically wrong on July the 4th. So it's going to be fascinating to watch it. I mean, it took the 1997 Parliament, the 2001 Parliament and the 2005 Parliament before the Tories kind of got their act together. So traditionally, parties that have lost on that scale are out in the wilderness for quite some time.
Is it fair to say that they sort of broadly fall into 2 categories, which is some Conservative MPs and people within the leadership contest that think we lost the election because we just were not Conservative enough. We should have been leaning much further to the right. We should have been getting into Nigel Farage territory and really going much harder on things like immigration. And then the other section of the party, which wants to move much more to the centre and sees itself as sort of, one nation, David Cameron, environmentalist, hug a hoodie type of thing.
What's striking to me is how there is a bit of resistance to the sort of old templates in this leadership contest. So take Priti Patel. You would put her down as a candidate maybe from the right, but she isn't proposing what some would see as the signature policy on the right, which would be to pull out of the European Convention of Human Rights. She said it'd be messy and difficult and take a long time and cause division, and so that's not a solution for her. But it is for somebody like Robert Jenrick, who is also of the right, But it is potentially also for Tom Tugendhat, who would be seen as a candidate of the One Nation. So he has floated potentially, maybe a bit more in sort of Rishi Sunak style, we could come to a day where we need to pull out of the European Convention of Human Rights as a solution to how to adopt a tougher migration policy. I think there are a lot of factors on the table. Policy is just one of them. Personality, ability to oppose. Given the number of candidates and the small number of MPs, how well you go down with your colleagues is quite important, and that's one of the reasons I think that the front runner amongst the members, Kemi Badenoch, may yet find that this race is a little bit trickier, having had a comparatively quieter summer. Does she come out next week, sort of all guns blazing, with lots more endorsements, or does she kind of keep up the kind of tempo that we've seen to date?
So let's move to the Labour Party, the new government, the new Prime Minister. They've not been in office very long. We've had the summer recess, so most of the new MPs have been away, although the Prime Minister's been dealing with things like riots in the streets. And of course, we've seen him already go over and extend an olive branch to some of the European leaders. So how do you think, just from the short time that they've been in office, this Labour government is going to want to define itself? And what are the events that might derail that?
I think one of the most striking things is just how comfortable in the job of Prime Minister Keir Starmer looks at the moment. I think he is a character all the way through his political journey. He's taken some time. I remember the Keir Starmer of 2020, who looked ill at ease at points with the job of being leader. As he might say now, things got worse before they were going to get better, and they certainly did then.
I've never seen someone go from being such a tense leader of the opposition to such a relaxed Prime Minister. He looks like he's been to a spa for a month. He looks like he has reached his life goal, and he is so happy about it.
When I talk about him looking comfortable, it's that he manages to give credible sounding answers on virtually daily interviews. He's done quite a lot of press conferences, far more than his predecessor, and he's had quite a lot to do, and he's had quite a lot thrown at him. And I think there are two big challenges. The first one is around money. I think that this government inherits a tricky fiscal situation. In other words, I think the government books are in a state which I don't quite see and understand how Rachel Reeves is going to make the sums add up. And I think the other great big challenge is, in order to make things better when there's not much money, you've got to do reform, and that's political choices. And I think, the great big test for this government over the autumn is, are they any good at reform? Does Keir Starmer know what the difficult decisions are that are going to make things better that he's gone to take? At the moment, rather than knowing the end point of the journey, we have a lot of kind of clues about how they're going to try and get there. So a lot of the sort of early decisions, things like setting up GB Energy, now that's a process, that's not a policy outcome. But when push comes to shove, how are people going to find government works different under Keir Starmer and under Labour? And what happens when basically bits of his team disagree with other bits? Because in opposition, I didn't think that Keir Starmer was terrifically efficient at dealing with, for instance, shadow cabinet ministers who disagreed with each other over the £28 billion green borrowing plan. It took months and months and months for him to resolve the tension between Ed Miliband and Rachel Reeves. Can he do that kind of thing more speedily?
One of the first things that we heard Rachel Reeves do was she stood up in Parliament. She hasn't even delivered a budget yet. And she has cut back hugely something called the winter fuel payment, which is a payment that goes out to every pensioner currently in the UK because it's a universal benefit. That happened before the MPs went on summer recess. It's basically their only policy to date. And yet the MPs have gone away over summer, and I think a lot of them are already getting loads of pushback on the doorstep from people who don't consider themselves rich. Does that show a level of real political naivety, and could that cause problems for the Labour Party?
Pretty much the first big thing that Chancellor Rachel Reeves did just before the summer was to come in and announce that the state of the public finances was so big that there was a £22 billion black hole in this year. Actually, when you look at it, 9 billion of that 22 billion is public sector pay rises that this government has chosen to give above and beyond what was already penciled in. Nevertheless, they claim that they've got £22 billion black hole this year and they've got to fill it. and scrapping the winter fuel allowance, which is the £200 payment for most pensioners. Basically, everybody loses it unless they're the lowest on the lowest income. So effectively, what you have to be claiming pensioner credit.
So I think 11 million people are eligible, and it will now go down to around 1 million.
Exactly. And there's real politics involved in that, right? This is a choice, a difficult choice, being done at the point at which Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are at the height of their power. But it is going to be the first of many such difficult decisions that are going to make Labour MPs uncomfortable. Different ways you can play it if you're a Labour MP. The winter fuel payment scrapping was announced by Rachel Reeves, but really it's a policy that comes under the Department for Work and Pensions. Secretary of State there is Liz Kendall. I think we at Sky know that at least one Labour MP, Jessica Sato, has written to Liz Kendall to talk about how nervous they are about this policy, how the impact.
That's quite something in the early days, isn't it? You know, as a newly elected Labour MP, to write to a Secretary of State to say, I don't like this policy.
It is, and to suggest bluntly that they change it. And I think what Asata wants to do is to widen the number of people that can claim it. But her concern is the people who just miss out. They aren't exactly rich, but they don't qualify for pensioner credit, and therefore they're seeing a big drop in their income at a point where, of course, the energy price cap is going to rise, so energy bills are going to rise this autumn, and so that is one of the reasons for particular concerns. She actually wants it to be given to people who apply for council tax reductions because they're on lower income, which would widen the number of people who qualify for it. There is no chance that Keir Starmer abandons the headline plan. This is just the first of several different big, tricky, horrible decisions that he's going to make, that he's not going to enjoy making, that are going to remove money from parts of the electorate. What Jessica Sarti's done is go, okay, I'm not saying do a U-turn, but there is just a little bit more that you could do.
Let's pause there for a quick break, after which Sam and I will do some looking ahead into Labour's upcoming challenges with their first big budget. We're back with Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor. So, Sam, let's start with a story that's in the newspapers today about Labour potentially planning a 4-day working week, or rather condensed hours or flexible working. I'm not entirely sure what this story is about. Can you explain it to us?
Listen out for the words, the New Deal for working people. It's Angela Rayner's baby, but it's being brought up, as it were, by Business Secretary Johnny Reynolds. And this is a big, big project by the Labour government to shift power a little bit away from employers and onto employees. In front of me, I've got the 24-page document, Labour's Plan to Make Work Pay, which sets out the huge number of different changes that this government has been elected to enact. And it stretches from scrapping quite a lot of the trade union laws that were introduced under the Conservative government, under David Cameron. And what this government has promised is a bill, legislation, to make flexible working the default from day one for all workers, except where that is not reasonably feasible. So at the moment, from day one, you have a right to request flexible working, but, particularly for low-income working class households, 1 in 3 requests is rejected. And I think what the unions hope is that there is basically an attempt to stop so many different requests for this being turned down, but this is very, very tricky. You'd have to repeal some legislation from 1996 and then somehow put into law this idea that it should become the default. But, Liz, there is no clarity whatsoever about exactly what this means, what employers are going to be obligated to do, what they have to do, what they don't have to do. On the one hand, this policy might end up amounting to very little, because unless you compel employers to accept every request or lots of requests without a good reason, then maybe it doesn't really change things. On the other hand, if employees are genuinely told by the government that your employer has no right to turn down your request unless they have a really, really good reason, then that will be transformative. But then you'll get a lot of businesses shouting about it, complaining about costs going up, saying that they are unable to deliver the growth that the country needs, and there'll be a backlash from that.
This is the challenge, isn't it, of going from opposition, where you sit around talking and saying all the things that you want to do to change the country and to improve workers' rights, etc., and moving into government where you actually have to work out the detail and you have to figure out how to make this all work in the real world. Before we go, do you want to give some bullet points of things that are coming up over the next weeks, months, things that we can look forward to, the budget, conference? What have you got your eye on?
So the biggest thing for the back end of 2024 is the October 30th budget. This is the first moment where the government really has to show its hand. Really, you only get one shot at the start of a parliament to do the worst stuff. You're at the height of your power. You know, nobody can touch you. Your MPs are probably broadly loyal. So if you're going to do the difficult stuff, October the 30th is the day. So they're going to reveal how much money is going to go into public services. They've got to fill the black hole, the £22 billion black hole. Well, when they scrapped winter fuel allowance and did a few other changes, they filled £5 billion of it. So there is £17 billion this year that they need to find, along with finding money for all sorts of things like the compensation programs for contaminated blood. And they ran a manifesto saying that they had no plans for tax rises beyond the very small and limited number that they showcased then.
The other thing that's incredibly important to talk about, maybe the most important thing, is your incredible podcast with Jack Blanchard from Politico. It's completely necessary to listen to if you're somebody like me who doesn't always know everything that's going on in Westminster and you need to hear it all.
So from Monday, we are starting up again with Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, a Sky News Politico joint project where we give you everything you need to know about the political day ahead in under 20 minutes, dropping in your feeds from 7:30 in the morning. So that means we get up incredibly early.
Are you doing it every day?
Every day, Monday to Thursday. There'll be Friday editions coming, but there'll be probably deeper dives on subjects, answering questions from listeners. We'll be up from the crack of dawn, from before the sun comes up, going through absolutely everything. Because although I think there's going to be a sense of politics maybe calming down a little bit in the UK, just as it ramps up in the US, we are still in the middle of a new government that is defining itself, doing complicated things that need to be explained. Tory leadership contest, how you deal with a new American administration. There are big things that are going to change people's lives and affect them. So we want to arm you with everything you need to know about the day ahead. So just so you understand what's going on, why people are doing what they're doing, what you're likely to hear, what would amount to a surprise, and why you should pay attention to how our country is governed.
Thank you so much to Sam Coates, and you can subscribe now to Politics at Jack and Sam's wherever you get your podcasts. That's it for the Daily. Neil will be back again on Monday. Thank you for listening.